Trans-satanic agenda, Part 2. In the previous video, we looked at the deep-seated transgender deception that has taken the world captive. We discussed how the only way to come out of this particular deception is to understand the skeletal structure of human beings, that male and female skeletal structures are designed differently for different purposes. A female skeleton is designed to hold a pregnancy. The male one is not. The skeletal structure of a person is predetermined by the DNA and can never be altered. The human flesh grows adapting to the skeletal structure already predetermined by the DNA. Transgenders, in honor of their religion, use various means to modify their physical features. One such method is using estrogen hormone on male to female transgenders to give them a believable feminine appearance, and testosterone hormone on female to male transgenders for a convincing male appearance. Surgeries too are incorporated in this craft. Liposculpture is used to give female to male transgenders a muscular, broader torso comparable to that of biological males. Tracheal shave or thyroid cartilage reduction is used by male to female transgenders to reduce the pronounced appearance of their Adam's apples. Breast and hip augmentation and fat contour too are other applicable surgeries M2Fs use to mimic biological female form, as well as sex reassignment surgery. Hormone blockers, human growth hormone, and steroids also assist in heightening this craft as much as possible. But skeletal structure can never be manipulated by hormone therapy. DNA has codes for bone growth. The flesh adapts to this bone growth. Hormones alter the flesh and hormone blockers prevent maturation, but usually to a limited extent. We saw how, over time, incrementally, the media introduced transgenders to the world as celebrities, to a point where now most of the people featured on television are inverted. The goal of this pursuit was complex, but mainly to hold masses captives to an extreme form of deception that should eventually result in a descent into confusion, chaos, and madness. Today we shall transvestigate. We shall look at some of these transgenders and learn how to practically apply what we've previously learned only in theory. Our first subject is Mike Todd, the senior and leading pastor of Transformation Church. Mike Todd is a biological female who presents as male and a Christian one at that. His quote-unquote wife is a biological male who presents as a female. But for now, let us focus primarily on Todd. Many of these Satanists are proud of their craft and their God, and so you'll see many of them in subtle ways mocking masses and even Elohim in the process. One such case is how Todd's church is called Transformation Church. The Instagram handle to this church reads, "We are Transformation," which to me is a subtle way of them admitting and mocking the crowds by saying, "We are trans." Here in these pictures, you can see the Todds making hand signals, one alluding to the fact that they are both genders, and the other the devil's horns. This is a common habit of this couple. The subject's face shows a very inviting soft gaze. The person has a large skull, but this can be developed through consistent hormone therapy. Use of testosterone causes many F2Ms to have pronounced features and larger skulls. What I've noticed, however, is that it usually looks odd on them. Their features still look very close together, leaving much of the face looking unnecessarily spaced out. A biological male has a large skull with facial features that are proportional to the size of their skull. The person has an oval face, a small jawline, and a pointed chin. These are female traits. I believe with the use of testosterone, the subject's chin became a bit more pronounced, but the face is soft, features fairly small, and closely spaced. Next, the subject has a short, rounded forehead, typical of females, and rounded cheeks showing they carry high levels of subcutaneous fat, which again is characteristic of females. The lip sizes and length look equal, and the facial features of this subject are very soft and mostly rounded. The long chin could also be attributed to hormone therapy. Most F2Ms usually struggle with growing a beard. This particular subject is using dye to make up for the wispy, uneven beard. The body 100% betrays their gender. The person has clear, slopey shoulders. The shoulder length to hip ratio looks equal. That is, the point at which the shoulders angle out into arms looks about equal with the widest part of the hips. The waist indentation starts from above the navel, expanding outward to form wide hips. there's a clear V clavicle and excessive mass on the chest area. Now these are images of the subject with a bit more weight on them. When women gain weight, it distributes all around them evenly. When men gain weight, it tends to mostly gather on their midsection and upper body, still maintaining the male form of a larger upper body. For instance, this is Leonardo DiCaprio, whom I'm convinced is a biological male. Here, he's at a bigger size than usual. See how much of the weight is gathered around the midsection. This subject clearly gains weight all over the body like a real woman. If you look at the crotch, you might be convinced otherwise, but there are tools used to make the nether region look pronounced, which I'll attach at the end. Here we have both of them. Once again, the slopey shoulders. Here we see more of the subject's soft arms, indicative of higher subcutaneous fat levels. And the most important area in transvestigating, the pelvic area. This one has wide hips, showing they carry space for a baby. The wide hips are supplemented with very curvy thighs, showing female fat levels. The partner has a clear T clavicle, which is of male skeletal structure, and long, low-hanging arms that, if allowed to rest, would have the wrist resting at the base of the crotch line. This M2F, I noticed, uses this clothing trick of wearing bell-bottomed trousers to cover up for the narrow hips. Taking estrogen can cause an increase in the flesh around the hip area, but it will still look very strange because it will gather fat on a masculine narrow pelvis, making the shape look low-hanging and strange, as opposed to soft, curvy, and outward as it would on a biological female. Here we see the subject's partner using the M2F trick again with the wide trousers. Here the subject's hips, waist indentation, slopey shoulders, and excessive chest mass are especially pronounced. The female Q angle is seen here as well, where the thighs curve gently inward into the knee. With a wide pelvis, when one sits, a wide shape forms, where the thighs and hips spread outward on the seat. This is clearly seen on the subject here. Wide thighs, wide hips spreading across the seat. With many F2Ms, they tend to glow around children. You can expect wider smiles, even softer looks around children. This is because of their innate maternal nature that cannot be suppressed even by transitioning. We see that with the subject here. These videos, if you look carefully, show that the subject has a very defined back arc that begins curving from high up the waist, going inward, then gradually curves outward. The female pelvic tilt is also quite visible. The person parades their chest as a way of mocking masses as well for not being able to tell that she is a woman. What I've seen is that African American transgender Satanists have to work all the more harder at their deception. Many of them, despite their best efforts, look very much like their biological sex, even to an untrained eye. That closes the case of Mike Todd. Now we will look at Priscilla Shirer, who is a biological male. Priscilla is the pastor of Going Beyond Ministries. With many of these M2Fs, when they're younger, they're more convincing and could even pass for females, but on growing older, their true sex defies all their best efforts. In this picture, you can see a clear T clavicle on the subject. Here, they're using a popular M2F trick where they take pictures with their face tilted slightly forward to hide their Adam's apple. But here we see the Adam's apple clearly. The person has grown older, so their biological sex is easier to tell. You can also see the very large skull and pronounced features that match the size of the skull. The jawline is quite defined, the mouth is quite large, the person has a very projected, piercing gaze. The neck is broad, and you can see the jutted rectangular shoulder on the left. With this particular subject, I've seen that they try their best to hide their ears, which are rather large, much like a male's. Here, the hair conveniently covers the very pronounced ears. Same with this one here. I like this picture because here we can clearly see the subject's long arms, defined muscles, rectangular shoulders, and lanky jutted bones all over the person. This shows the person has low subcutaneous fat levels and more muscle, as a normal male would. At a closer view, the person has a very narrow pelvis, long linear legs, and even a defined brow ridge, which is common in males. The square, strong chin is proportionate with a large mouth. Overall, this person has very pronounced features. This picture shows that the person has unusually long arms. This cannot be expected of a woman, but certainly of a man. The subject is also using an M2F trick of wearing dark colors on the upper body and brighter colors at the bottom to create the illusion of a female form, of a smaller torso and a broad lower body. Here we have the male finger digit ratio, where the ring finger is noticeably longer than the index. The subject has a clear straight back that projects all the way downward to a flat posterior. Combining this with a narrow rectangular pelvis, and you'll see that the person carries no space for a baby in them. With this subject, I had to use old pictures. I noticed they have very few full body length photos. Also in recent videos, the subject has wide hips, showing a hip augmentation surgery took place at some point. Another interesting observation I found was this photo of the subject with their apparent sons. I noticed one of them looked quite soft all over the body. They had a short, rounded forehead, small, close-spaced facial features, thin, delicate neck, slopey shoulders, female finger digit ratio where the index finger and the ring finger appear equal, rounded knees, and curvy thighs. By the sitting posture, you can tell that the hips spread outward across the seat like a person with a wide pelvis. If you compare the sitting posture with that of the subject, you'll see that the subject's pelvis area does not spread out while in a seated position. The subject's legs remain long and lean. In transvestigating, we look at all the features in conjunction with one another and see whether they amount to a biological male or female. The F2M has a slight cartilage around the neck, which can be developed through consistent use of testosterone. These celebrities are usually generational Satanists, and so they induce their children to follow after them. I would not be surprised if this one was the sacrifice for the subject's quote-unquote success as a quote-unquote pastor. So that closes the case of Priscilla Shirer. And now we look at the very daunting case of Childish Gambino. Childish Gambino is an entertainer most known for the video that went viral in 2018 called This Is America. Childish Gambino is a woman. The subject's face is very soft-looking and inviting. The forehead is short and rounded. The facial features are small, closely spaced out, just like that of a woman. The subject has slopey shoulders, a short neck, and a high waistline. Putting hands in the pockets is a common F2M trick, which they use to cover up for their wide, very visible hips. Now, I found this subject to be a dangerous F2M in the way that they openly mock masses by constantly bearing their chest out. As discussed in the previous video, this is a way of grooming biological males for homosexuality, as continually exposing them to a male-presenting, female-bearing chest signals sexual attraction to the subconscious mind of biological males for what presents itself as a male. In this video, the subject looked heavily possessed. I am convinced they have principalities of homosexual lust attached to them for the purpose of luring as many males as possible into homosexuality. The subject's defined pectoral area can be seen clearly. The chest is fleshy and projects outward, just like that of a developed mature female. If you look at where the arms rest, it is at the front of her hips and legs. Women's arms angle out at the shoulders when hanging directly side by side to create space for the hips. The palms face the widest part of the subject's hips. The subject's waistline has a high indentation that gradually curves outward to form wide hips. Here the subject's arc can clearly be seen. It definitively curves inward, then gradually outward into a pronounced posterior. The pelvic tilt at the front is also very evident. The subject's arms look soft, quite short for a male, but not for a female. Here the crotch line can be seen clearly to be that of a female. There are curvy wide hips at the pelvis area and the female Q angle where the thighs curve gently into the knee. The V clavicle is evident here. See how the waist indentation starts high up right above the navel, then gradually expands outward to form a broader lower body. There's a very clear V clavicle on the subject. The person even sings with a very feminine voice and is often topless in her performances. This is open mockery to the masses for being so brainwashed to a point where they cannot tell, as well as a flamboyant ode to the subject's god, Baphomet. The viral video was titled This Is America, which to me was symbolically saying openly that Satanists have been successful in their trans agenda in America and by extension the rest of the world. As far back as 2018, the subject was openly giving ode to the Baphomet for this achievement, saying the deception has been so successful that even if she parades herself topless throughout the video, they wouldn't notice a thing. That closes the terrible case of Childish Gambino. And now we look at Iain Armitage, the protagonist who plays Sheldon in the sitcom Young Sheldon. This is also a biological female. Starting with this picture, you can see the skeletal slope of the shoulders on the subject, the soft gaze on the subject, and the overall inviting look. The rounded face is indicative of higher subcutaneous fat levels as you would find on a female. On a closer look, you see the rounded forehead. The person is using an F2M trick of using a haircut to try and mimic the biological male's square forehead. The subject's facial features are small, closely spaced out. The person has round cheeks, round chin, small ears, and overall no pronounced features. This is apparently the subject as a baby, and you can see they are clearly a girl. When they are young, it's easy to tell their eternal energy because much has not been manipulated yet. Look at the subject's soft, inviting gaze, small features, and even equal-length top and bottom lip, which is typical of females. Again, the gaze, the rounded features. This person can easily be seen to be a girl. At full length, you can see the person's waist indentation begins high up, right above the navel, and gradually curves outward to form wide hips. The person's greater mass is on the lower part, and the arms rest in front of the legs, with the palms facing the hips, resting at the widest part of the hips. The subject has very delicate-looking hands. Here you can see the subject's clear Q angle, where the thighs are very curvy, at least too curvy for a boy, and gently curve inward into the knee. The legs also look soft and curvy all the way to the ankles, unlike a male's, which would have more muscle at the calf and then thin out all the way to jutted, pronounced ankles. Here we see an F2M trick of wearing clothing to cover the wide hips and the wide pelvic area, but the arms once again are resting at the widest part of the hips. Here the overall softness of the subject very clearly betrays their biological sex. There's too much flesh around the chest area, slopey shoulders, softness all over the face, and even soft arms indicative of normal fat levels for a female. The pronounced wide hips showing the person has a wide pelvis and space to carry a baby. And here you see the back arc once more that starts at a high point in the back, curving outward. Here the pelvic tilt is also evident. The excessive chest mass, pronounced posterior, soft knees and legs that gently curve all the way to the ankles. Here the subject's delicate wrist and hands and short arms can clearly be seen. The subject also has a widow's peak, which is typical of females. And here more of the female gait is seen. The person is walking with one foot in front of the other, unlike males who walk with one foot after the other in an equidistant fashion, like marching. And of course the casting directors could not miss out on their chance of parading her topless. With grown F2Ms, they are clearly grooming masses for homosexuality, but here I think the intent is to subconsciously groom masses for pedophilia. Their deception usually takes place gradually, inch by inch, chipping away at people's subconscious until they see nothing wrong with evil and madness. That closes the case of Armitage. The final subject is Raegan Revord, who plays young Sheldon's twin sister. This one is a biological male. When you put them side by side, you see clearly who has male and who has female energy. Side by side, it becomes obvious who is the girl and who is the boy. This subject, when younger, struck me as who would have been a very cheeky, very mischievous little boy. Their gaze is unmistakable, it is fierce, it is projected outward, intense and piercing. This subject also has a defined brow ridge, defined square jawline, and very veiny hands, all characteristic of males. Though they have thin, small lips, which is common with people of Caucasian descent, you can still tell that the upper lip is smaller than the lower, as you would find on a proper male. The subject has long arms which hang low, with their wrist falling squarely at the base of their crotch line. They have very lean long legs, showing low subcutaneous fat levels, just like that of males. The pelvic area is too narrow for a girl, even at this age. There's absolutely no space for a baby in there. Again, here we have the subject with a straight torso, which means no pelvic tilt, long linear legs, and a narrow pelvis. Their thighs show no Q angle. Instead, we're looking at low fat level thighs here. I like this picture because it shows the plain jutted knees, and how the legs have muscle at the calf that progressively gets thinner going downward. Here we see absolutely no back arc, just a straight back that projects all the way lower to a flat posterior. Again, no back arc. In this one, even with the ruffles, you can tell that the person has long rectangular shoulders. I barely found pictures of this person's clavicle, but here it can clearly be seen to be a T clavicle, and even in this one, they've really tried to skillfully mask it. I found this picture interesting because, in my observation at least, I thought that these feet were too large for a so-called girl of that age. But in a boy, the feet would actually make sense. Also with this subject, I found that they take many pictures with their heads slightly tilted on the side. It had me wondering whether, as part of the training they gave them, they asked them to do so in order to look more quote-unquote feminine. Because this subject's face, demeanor, physicality, and overall energy reeks of a male. In the future, I feel like they'll face a true task at masking their biological sex. That closes the case of Raegan. It is important to note that in order for deception to work, it must be laced with some truth. An effective deception cannot be black and white, but various shades of grey. Avoid painting every one of these celebrities with one brush, as that would still constitute the same mindset of dull-mindedness and deception. There are many inverted celebrities throughout Hollywood. They may even constitute the majority of the populace there, as many of them are generational Satanists, compelling their children into Satanism absent of their choice. However, there are biological males and females too in their midst. This does not mean that the biological ones are not part of their agenda. They surely are, as many of them date and marry these inverts and further perpetuate this mass deception. A good example is Brad Pitt, a biological male who for all his lifetime has been dating and marrying inverts. The Satanist slogan, at least the one they present to the masses, is "Do as thou wilt," which is synonymous with colloquial terms such as "my truth" or "do you, boo-boo." It presents itself as a freedom-pursuing movement, and many have seen the sense in this slogan. Except Satan, in his deceptive nature, will always show you what you want to see, with obviously an entirely different agenda in mind. If you are following this discussion soberly, then you can tell that Satan's goal is certainly not freedom and acceptance for all, but to control and subdue without any alternative. This he hopes to achieve first by causing mass psychological breakdown, incrementally through complex deception, and when this is done, it is game on from there. In reality, Satanist slogan is not "do as thou wilt," but "do what we want," whether you approve of it or not. I want to give props to the Master's Voice Prophecy blog YouTube channel for this revelation, which can be found under the Beautiful Men series. I also want to give an honorable mention to the YouTube channel Phony Persephone for teaching me how to properly transvestigate and to come out of this satanic deception. I have to say that I repented greatly after coming to terms with the truth of this deception. I repented of not believing the scriptures when they told me that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. If you're part of the younger generation, then it is very likely that Hollywood has been an instrumental part of your childhood and even teenage years. From a tender age, they were programming us to admire and desire what we cannot attain and devalue ourselves in the process. Growing up comparing ourselves to celebrities and even feeling like we're not worth being loved because we will never look like many of them. The more I thought about this, the more I realized just how, though unwittingly, I had offended the Creator, Yah Elohim. You see, when you as the real Eve hate what you look like or are convinced that you are not enough and would desire to look more like a Megan Fox or Jessica Alba or maybe Ciara, I don't know, any of these male to female transgenders, whether you realize it or not, you are saying that Yah is a pathetic creator and Satan does a better job. For these transgenders are Satan's creation. When Yah formed Eve, he formed what he found beautiful and approved of it exactly as it was. No makeup, no extensions, no additions or removals, nothing. He loved her exactly as he made her and called her beautiful. So if you, who was conceived in the mind of the Almighty Creator, Yah, find your worth to be non-existent or barely even there, but on the other hand, esteem greatly and even desire to look like what was conceived in the mind of Satan, then you can see for yourself how greatly offensive this is to the Most High. Upon this revelation, I have repented of vicarious Satanism, because there are some celebrities I truly admired, but they served the Baphomet. In admiring them, I admired who they represented, Baphomet. I have asked for forgiveness for not finding enough worth in myself as Yah's creation, and instead attaching more value in my eyes to what was Satan's brainchild. I have asked the Kodesh Father to help me believe the scriptures as they are, and not to deflect, looking either to the right or to the left, no matter how convincing a deviation from them may be. Thanks, friends. I pray this helped with your spiritual growth and understanding. Until I see you next time, may Yah bless and keep you. Goodbye.
It's day 4 of being a boy, and I'm back in my usual bedrooms, which means I will be able to use this when I go out today. Now, obviously, I can't take it out of this sock and show you, but this is a packer, which is a silicone, flexible, flaccid, so it's a little nerve-wracking wearing my packer outside because obviously it's meant to simulate a bulge in your pants, and I don't have anyone to tell me if it looks natural or real. I just kind of have to go off of feel, so that can be a little bit off-putting. Also my chest binder also fell apart a few months ago, and I haven't had the time or the money to get a new one, so it kind of kills the confidence a little bit to have my chest quite clearly on show. But it's all just stepping stones. We'll get there.